So I'm Emily Males. I'm the Chief eHealth Strategy Officer at the Department of Health in Victoria. And my job is to set the strategic agenda for digital for the Victorian healthcare system. And I also look after cybersecurity.
Cool. What brings you to Australian Healthcare Week?
So it is always good to come to these big healthcare conferences. It's been good walking the floor and seeing what's new and how things have progressed since last year. But also, I've got a few talks. Yesterday, I did a masterclass on cybersecurity awareness and raising that awareness in your workforce. And then in just a few minutes after this, I'm doing a talk on the next 10 years for digital investment in Victoria.
Very cool. Hey, I just thought then, as tying together both cybersecurity and the digital health strategy, it's interesting that those two are kind of all part and one of the remit. Is it important that cyber is kind of called out separately? Because some people might think, oh, well, I guess cyber is just part of the strategy or it's just one element that we do. Why is it so important that those two things are part of the one?
Well, for me, it's because there's also a massive operational component of cybersecurity. So running, monitoring, we've got a 24/7 operation, making sure that ideally there are no incidents, but if there is one, it's picked up really quickly and managed. Whereas the digital strategy component of my job is like I exist 10 years in the future.
Yeah.
And it's not super operational, although I work closely with the other branches in eHealth that are really focused on delivering what the strategy is. So that's why I differentiate.
Cool. And there are e-healths in other states of Australia, and it's interesting seeing the direction that those states are going when it comes to digital. What's the direction for Victoria?
So we are just now setting our 10-year vision and plan for investment in that capability and digitally enabled care. And the next 10 years will be fascinating, right? So technology is advancing really quickly. There's a whole bunch going on globally. Even things like venture capital in digital health is now on the rise again. It had a bit of a slowdown after COVID. And so the next 10 years from a strategy point of view can't be linear. So the approach that we're taking is focusing first on the outcomes we want to achieve in 10 years, not technology outcomes, but system outcomes, patient outcomes, workforce outcomes, being really clear on those, and they're shared and everyone can galvanize around them, and then being really adaptive in how we might work towards them. So shorter term roadmaps and action plans that sort of take us closer to that vision, but also developing delivery models that are moving away from the big bang sort of 2, 3, 5, 10-year IT programs, but actually making that much more incremental and as much as possible making it a BAU capability. So we're always improving our digital maturity.
Yeah, that's. I feel like that's important sometimes too, to be able to deliver here's examples of what success looked like along the way, and if you can bring people through on that journey and be part of that where we're heading, but have those incremental wins along the way, that's super important. I'm also interested too on the healthcare for everyone globally over the next 10 years is going to be pretty wild, and it's interesting looking at not just what we're doing in Australia, but also overseas. Are you looking abroad as well about what's happening in other parts of the world and how they're doing health?
Definitely. And what remains true is that no one's cracked the nut on how to deal with the immense pressure that the system, particularly public healthcare systems, are under, but even some of the big, money-laden private healthcare organizations in America, there's still inequity in their regions. They haven't fully solved it. And so I think it's about taking that grain of salt when you look globally. What are the great models that we can learn from, but how do you translate it into our context? In Victoria, we have over 70 organizations that work together to deliver healthcare. It might not be as easy for us to adopt a model that's been successful in South Australia, let alone Scandinavia. So it's really about understanding what are what outcomes do we want, what capabilities do we need to get there, and then what's the most effective way to build them based on our context.
Yeah, that's going to be important. Lastly, before I let you go over and do your session on the stage shortly, what are you hoping people take away from the session that you're about to deliver?
So there were 3 takeaways that I've got in my talk. The first one is that the future will be different. And we need to plan for it. So the way that technology is advancing, technology becoming much more pervasive in our lives, that's speeding up. Yep. The second one is, I'm testing myself now. The second one is in an environment of constraint, we have to focus on the quick wins and the leapfrog opportunities. So moving away from that linear progression, because we'll just never get there. And then finally, and most importantly, sort of the main point I'm trying to make is that long-term value requires scale. And most of our investment in digital is subscale, and that's why it's not addressing those system pressures to the extent that we need it to. And so our next 10 years in Victoria is all about figuring out how do we unlock that scale so that we are reaching that sort of that sustainable healthcare system that we need to get to.